Hello friends and welcome to another video lesson from BBOS Talks. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click subscribe and click the bell so that you can be notified of new uploads. This video is in the playlist called Handling Dates in SQL. And here we'll be learning about two date functions called next day and last day. All right, so let's start with next day. You just get what it does, okay? So next day, it returns the next specified day. When we say day, we mean Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. That's the day that I mean, okay? So the syntax for that is like this. So next day, then your first parameter is the date value, which could be a hard-coded date or a column value. And the second parameter is the string for the day. Not this word, but it means Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, etc. All right. So that's next day. Let's look at an example of the next day function, which is a date function, using a hard-coded date in the first as its first parameter. Okay, so next day, again, I'm using it within a select statement. So let's select next day, sysdate being the date value, second parameter being the day value, which is a string. So I'm specifying Tuesday, and then this is just an alias from dual. What I mean here is that with respect to the sysdate, with respect to this date value, I want SQL to give me the coming Tuesday date, the date for the next Tuesday, right after the sysdate. All right. So today the date is 10th of July. So I'm telling SQL to give me the next Tuesday, the nearest Tuesday after today's date. That's what it means. All right. So it's giving me the next day, which is a Tuesday, will fall on the 15th of July, which is 5 days from now, which is correct because today it's a Thursday. Okay, so the Tuesday is 5 days away from now. So that's your next day. So this is using a hard-coded date value, which is the first parameter in here. Second example is using, instead of hard-coded date, I'm using a column value. Okay, again, the next day function contains or uses accepts two parameters. So a date value, which could be hard-coded, or could be a column name, which has an underlying value of a date, and the second parameter being the day that you want to specify. Would be Monday all the way to Sunday, any of them. So select surname. I am displaying 3 columns here. Surname, the birth date, which is of a date value, and the next day here. Next day of birth date, and then comma, Tuesday. What I mean is, I want the SQL engine to give me the next Tuesday or the nearest Tuesday right after this date, which is, this time it's not this date, but it's the birth date. It is a column value from the table called employees. All right, let's just see it. So here we get better perspective because we are displaying the values of 3 columns. The surname, for reference, if you may, and then you have a birth date here, birth date column, and then you have a next day. So what the next day is doing is that with respect to the birth date column, which is the first parameter I'm specifying in the next day function, with respect to that date value, I am trying to get the next or the coming Tuesday date. So in this case, 28 August 2011, the next Tuesday is 30th August, and so on. So I hope you understand that. Okay, so we have seen how the next day function, which is the date function, works. Gives you the next or the coming future date, date corresponding to a day which you have specified. All right. Now let's move on to another date function which sounds similar. Instead of next day, it's called last day. So last day function is also a date function in SQL, and it returns the last day of the month with respect to a date that you will specify. All right. So the syntax for last day is just, it only accepts one parameter. So last day and then one parameter, which is a date value. That date value again could be a hard-coded one or could be a column value with an underlying date value. All right. So last day, the last day of the month. First example, let's look at a hard-coded value. So when I say hard-coded value, it is the one within the being used by the last day function, which is the first parameter or the only parameter being accepted, in fact. So select last day, which is a function, and then the parameter is in here, sysdate from dual. Again, the parameter can be a hard-coded date. In this case, this is kind of hard-coded because it pertains to today's date, although it's kind of dynamic because tomorrow's state is different from today's. But just for simplicity, I'm calling it hard-coded. So the other way of using a function, as we have seen in the previous examples, in the previous videos, is using a column value. In that way, it's dynamic. We're getting the value, the underlying value of a column of a table. All right, so let's look at this one. All right, so select last day, sysdate from dual. What it is doing is SQL will look at the date being supplied as a parameter to the function, in this case sysdate. Today's date happens to be 10th of July 2025. So what last day will do is it will look at that date, 10th of July, and then based on that date's month, it will return to you the last day of that month. So 10th of July 2025, the last day of that month, July 2025, is 31 July 2025. Okay, so that is your first example using a hard-coded, sort of hard-coded value, which is in fact sysdate. Second example we'll be looking at is a bit dynamic, looking at a column value being supplied as a parameter to the last day function. So I'm selecting 3 columns for perspective here for better reference and comparison. So select surname, birth date, last day, birth date, so that you can compare the birth date value as well as the last day of that birth date value. Again, last day will return to you the last day of the month with reference to the date you're supplying as a parameter. All right. Okay, let's execute this one. Okay, so it shows you 3 columns, the surname, the birth date, and the last day. The last column with an alias last day is a derivation of the second column, which is birth date. So what it does is, what it did was to get the last date of the birthday columns, birth date. So in this case, it's like example 28 August 2011, SQL will look at the month and the year of that and get to the end of the month of that. So 28 August 2011, 31 August 2011 is the last day. If it's 25th March 2006, then the last day of that month is 31st March 2006, and so on. Okay, so in this video, we've seen and learned about 2 date functions which are related, not totally related, but a bit similar. So we have learned about next day and last day. And not only that, we have seen, just as in the previous videos, you have seen how it's being used with parameters that are either hard-coded values or column values from a table. Okay, thank you for watching and listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click subscribe and click the bell and just pass the word. And I'll be seeing you in the next video.